Welcome to the And She Looked Up podcast. Each week, we sit down with inspiring Canadian women who create for a living. We talk about their creative journeys and their best business tips, as well as the creative and business mindset issues all creative entrepreneurs struggle with. I'm your host, Melissa Hartfield, and after leaving a 20-year career in corporate retail, I've been happily self-employed for 12 years. I'm a graphic designer, an illustrator, and a multi-six-figure-a-year entrepreneur in the digital content space. This podcast is for the artists, the makers, and the creatives who want to find a way to make a living doing what they love. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the And She Looked Up podcast. As always, I'm your host, Melissa, and this week I am super excited to be welcoming my lovely friend, Louisa Hrennikoff, to the podcast. She is the designer and maker behind Luli Designs, a jewelry design brand, and today we're going to be talking about not only her creative journey, but we're also going to be talking about craft fairs and artisan fairs and farmers markets and the whole craft market scene, because we are heading into that time of year. So before we do that, welcome to the podcast, Louisa.
Thank you, Melissa.
I am really happy that you're here today, and we've actually I was thinking about this the other day. We've actually known each other for probably a little over a decade now.
I know. I was trying to calculate when it was, and I couldn't quite figure out, but it's been a while. It's been a long time.
It's been a while, and it was actually a mutual friend who introduced us. I mentioned to somebody that I wanted to start selling on Etsy, and she said, "Oh, you have to meet my friend Louisa." And I did, and we hit it off, and it still took me almost a decade to get on Etsy, but I got there eventually, so. So before we dive into the interview, just so you can all know a little bit more about Louisa, as I mentioned, she's the owner and maker of Luli Designs, a handmade local jewelry company here in Vancouver. She sells on Etsy and at local markets and in local shops, which I actually forgot about. We might talk about that a little bit too. She has a background in design and fashion and has always enjoyed being creative and started making jewelry as a child. Luli Designs was started when Louisa was living on the Sunshine Coast here in BC in 2005, and then it traveled with her to Toronto and then back to Vancouver, where she and the company are now located. She juggles the life of a business owner with being a parent of 2 daughters and now also a Labrador puppy who we have just spent the last 15 minutes talking about. He's so cute.
It's like having another child.
It is. And we could talk about puppies all day. So, so the first question I ask everybody who comes on the show, Louisa, and we kind of talked about it in your bio there, is Did you feel like you were creative as a kid?
Definitely. Yeah. No, I have always, my mom started me on jewelry actually as a kid. I think I was about 8, and she had some of that sort of colorful telephone wire that she got somewhere, and we made coiled up rings and things like that out of this telephone wire. So it kind of started with that. But I also sewed and knitted, and because my mom was a knitter, and did lots of things, kind of woodworking with my dad, and I was really into photography as a teenager as well.
Oh, I didn't know about the photography part. That's cool.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your creative background. I know that you grew up in Vancouver and you went to school here, but you went away for university, I believe, didn't you?
I did. I went to Concordia in Montreal first, and I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts major in design art. And then I took a year in between. I actually had to go back and do grade 12 math so that I could then apply for Ryerson University to do a Bachelor of Design major in fashion communications. They required math, and I hadn't done that in high school. So then I went on to Ryerson after that.
You needed math 12 to do fashion design?
Yep.
All right, everybody. So,
and I was really encouraged in high school to do math for that reason, that there's lots of programs that do require it. But at the time, it wasn't the right time for me. I struggled with high school, and it would have not gone well. So I decided to skip on that, and going back and doing it in college after my first degree was actually perfect for me. I excelled in it, and it was much more successful than if I'd done it the other way around.
Yeah, I did Math 12 in high school because I needed it for my university program.
Yeah.
And I got a P in it, which stood for pass back then. And I remember my Algebra 12 teacher saying to me, I don't ever want to see you here again.
Well, there you go.
And I retook it in my first year of university and did much, much better in it.
Yeah.
I think I just needed the little extra bit of time. But
exactly. And that is obviously exactly what happened with me. And it was the way it was supposed to all work out.
Exactly. But it's just a reminder for everyone out there. I know sometimes when we're creative that math can be a challenge for a lot of us. Not all of us, but for some of us it really can be. But there is not a day where I unfortunately don't have to use math as a designer. And I hate it, but you know. So just a warning for everyone out there, you do need math. So, so you went on to Ryerson and did your degree in fashion there. And I know just from knowing you that you have always dabbled in different small businesses, I guess. I think you made...
Yes.
I remember seeing a picture of you, I think it might have been on Facebook or something, of you very young making jewelry at the beach.
Oh, yes. You saw that picture. Yeah. I did a throwback Thursday on my Instagram with that picture. It was a photo that a family friend sent. But anyway, back in the day when the Vancouver Folk Fest didn't have an artisan market of any kind, or the artisan bazaar, which it's now called, outside their doors, I set up at the beach with a blanket and sold my macrame and Fimo bead jewelry right after high school. And I spent a summer, that's what I did the summer after I graduated. And I sold to a couple of stores in Granville Island. And I set up a blanket outside Folk Fest.
There you go. See, there's always a way. There's always a way. But you also did some stuff, I think, if I recall correctly, maybe I'm getting this mixed up, but when you were in school, I believe, or living in Toronto, you also started selling online. I don't know if it was jewelry, but I seem to recall that you were one of the first people I knew to actually sell online. And this might have even been pre-Etsy.
So we started off actually, so I already had my jewelry business started. And then with a partner of mine at the time, he and I started, or I think he'd already started it, but I joined in on his eBay business selling trading cards.
That's it, yes.
Yeah. And I learned so much about selling online by doing that business, even though it was not a successful or sustainable business. I did learn an awful lot about packaging, customer service, shipping stuff out on time, shipping internationally. It was a really very valuable experience from that perspective.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I remember thinking at the time, like, I think you must be one of like the OG online sellers.
eBay had been around for a while, but yeah, it was still at the beginning. And then I opened my jewelry Etsy shop in 2007, and that was in tandem to doing the eBay business for a little while. And Etsy was quite new. I can't remember what year. I think it may have been 2006 Etsy started. Yeah. And a mutual friend mentioned it to me, and I got on there, and it was just such an amazing place to start your business, like to build your business at that time.
Yeah. And you also made and sold clothes for Blythe Dolls as well, I think.
I did, yeah. And that started in 2008. So again, that was... the eBay business ended, and I moved back to Vancouver, or maybe just before I moved back to Vancouver, I started a second Etsy shop selling, dolls.
What made you decide?
Geek side for you.
Yeah, there you go. When did you decide, like, jewelry is what I'm going to focus on? That's going to be the one.
It was always my main business. Mm-hmm. The Blythe business did actually really well. And I probably, if I'd really dived into that, it probably could have been more. It could have probably been more like financially viable. Mm-hmm. But it's such a niche market, and I didn't want to pinhole myself into that tiny little market. And with jewelry, I liked the variety of things that you could do, and my style has evolved over time. So that's why I stuck with jewelry.
And in there, you became a mom for the first time. Yes. And you've got two young daughters now who are, I think they're both in school at this point. But I know that for you, and I know for a lot of our audience, and this is always really hard for me to speak to because I'm not a mom, but I know so many of people who listen are also, they're juggling parenthood, creativity, business, and it can often feel like it's like this three-way struggle and
Yeah,
and you're never really sure that you're doing anything very well for anyone. And I know that can be really
exactly.
hard.
That is exactly how I feel on a daily basis.
Yes, and it's as somebody who's not a mom, it's actually really hard for me to watch my friends going through that because I can just see how incredibly hard they are on themselves.
Yeah.
And it can be really hard, I think, in those situations to just give yourself a break.
Yeah.
But do you think, how did you manage? I know you cut back quite a bit, but how did you manage in those really early years?
Well, part of the reason I wanted to have my own business to begin with was because I did want to have kids and I did want to be the one that raised them. That was always something that was really important to me. So I thought that having my own business would allow me to be able to continue on with my business. And that's, being naive before you're actually a parent. Diving into it, it ended up being good in that it just needed to dial down when I had had my kids. And with my first, it was actually, I did still do a lot of shows. I did my last craft show when I was still, I think I was 36 weeks pregnant, 34 weeks. Anyway, I was quite far along. And I did a Make It show. And I still continued to do every Make It after that. But I did have to dial down, and I pulled out of stores after my first was born. But I did still continue because she was quite a good napper. So I did get that time during the day. Yeah,
Yeah.
I just had to go with the flow on what was possible, depending on what was happening.
Yeah, I think that's a really key point there, going with the flow. And I think sometimes whether you're a mom or not, there's lots of things that can pull you away from your business. And I think sometimes it's okay for there to be seasons in your business, just as you
Absolutely.
try to navigate the different things that life shows you. And I think sometimes we just really try so hard to keep everything firing
Yeah.
at 100%. And I think sometimes we just need to pull the levers. It's like sometimes you can push more on this lever and pull back more on this lever, and try to let it all balance out. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think you really do need to kind of moms, please cut yourself some slack out
I
there.
mean, the pandemic made that
Yes.
even more amplified in
Oh yeah.
that, the kids were at home. And then unfortunately, my dad was really sick and he
Hmm.
passed away right near the beginning of the pandemic. And honestly, I had zero motivation and I was just trying to save the mental health of myself and my kids. And I really didn't do much with my business at all in the summer and fall of 2020. And that was just the way it had to be.
Yeah, that's totally okay.
Yeah.
It really is. There's just times where you just have to say no to things, and it's totally fine. It's because you can always ramp back up, which is kind of what I've seen you doing in the last few months. You've started to become much more active.
Yeah.
I will say, like, it seems from watching you just based on social media that you did ease up on Etsy and you did really focus on markets. And maybe was that a good way for you to keep your business going while your daughters were really young? Did you find that to be a good strategy?
Easing up on Etsy was twofold. It was having to photograph and really, write great content descriptions and all of that. I found really difficult to do with a small child around, whereas I could focus just on the jewelry and then do the markets. And you're paying for the markets, so they're doing a lot of the traffic generation and social media and all of that. And you still had to post and be active with social media to promote a market, but there was less of that necessity for me and more time to focus on the creative side of it and just making more jewelry. And also, I will admit there were some shows where I just had the same stuff that I had from the previous market, but if you displayed it differently, people just thought it was all new. So I did have markets where I'm like, oh, well, you just, again, got to go with it. This is what I have, and let's just move forward.
There's a tip for everybody.
Yeah. Display is very important in that way. But also with Etsy got very saturated.
Yeah.
It was at the beginning in 2007, you posted something, you sold it fairly shortly afterwards. There was not the number of shops on there. It was very much people went there for handmade, and it was a lot of creative people who were buying and selling from each other as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very different than it is now. And so Etsy was dipping down in sales for me anyway, so that's why I decided to pull my focus onto markets as well. So it was, like I said, twofold.
It's a good strategy. It's also always good to have different revenue streams, whatever your business is.
Very important.
And if you Absolutely. Thought Etsy was saturated in 2019, my goodness, when the pandemic started, I think anybody who wasn't on Etsy suddenly opened an Etsy shop to sell masks or whatever the case may be. So it has definitely become even more saturated in the last year and a half. So
yeah, it's very cool.
Yeah. Before we dive into talking about markets, which is what we're mostly going to be focusing on, I didn't throw this question at you because it wasn't until I read your bio that it reminded me, but you also have gotten your jewelry into several local shops here in Vancouver. And I know that's something that a lot of people would love to be able to do, but really have no idea how to go about it. And I'm just curious if maybe you could just talk about, like, how did you knock on the door and say, hi, I make jewelry, would you like to sell it? Or
well, I started having my work in stores in Toronto when I was living out there.
Okay.
There were a couple of local stores that carried my work, and I think I got at least one of them. I had a jewelry friend introduction to that store. And then the other one, I have a feeling I just walked into. Nowadays, I would probably email or if a friend says, oh, your work would be great in this place, and I would email them and say, hey, I have a customer of yours suggested your store, are you interested in carrying my work? And I've also had people, that I've just gotten to know in the fashion world or industry in general through social media who have asked me as well. I don't have work in a lot of stores because it's often on consignment versus wholesale. Consignment is quite time consuming because you do have to keep track of what they've got and replenish them regularly and all of that. So yeah, I have my work in a few stores. And right now, I guess the ones I'm in are mostly social media contacts.
Okay. And that was actually going to be one of my questions is it consignment or are you doing wholesale? So
I have both right now.
Okay, cool. Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And for those of you who are maybe not as familiar with consignment, that's basically where you put your product into a store and they pay you as it sells, generally speaking. So as opposed to wholesale where they are paying you upon delivery of your goods and then it's on them to sell it. And so that's good to know.
And I've also had stores approach me at markets as well when they see my work there. Often stores go and hunt for new product.
Yes, very true, actually. And that's something I think we tend to forget about. I think we sort of think that only happens at trade shows. But in some ways, a lot of the markets, particularly I would guess, would be the bigger markets like the Got Crafts and the Make It's. Where stores are treating it as a trade show and going out and specifically looking for product to bring in. Do you sell on any of the wholesale platforms like Fair or
No, I haven't delved into that.
Okay.
Fair I've looked at, but that's as far as I've gotten with it. It's hard for me to produce enough product to have things in multiple different stores and be able to replenish them as well as Etsy and markets.
It's especially when everything you make is handmade. That's tough.
Especially with the beadwork that I'm doing prominently now. It's quite time consuming, so there's only so much I can physically produce.
Okay. Good to know. Okay, so let's get into markets. So one of the reasons why I wanted Louisa on the show is because ever since I've known her, she's been very heavily involved in the market scene here in BC. She does everything from small local community markets right up to some of the biggest markets in Western Canada, like the Make It Show, which is, I think is probably one of the biggest, certainly in BC and Alberta. She does both extremes, I would say.
I do, actually, and I still do.
Yeah.
I still do both.
So for those who are just starting out, the idea of selling in person can be very daunting in so many different ways. And I think the biggest question most people have when they're starting out is, how do you even find markets to participate in?
Right. Well, I've been doing it so long that I have tried everything, I think, except for one of a kind. I have not done that in Toronto or Circle Craft. Those have always been maybe, because I would say those are probably the two biggest ones. I've always gone one notch down below that. But I've done Make It for over 10 years now. So it was a lot smaller when I first started doing it. They were at the Roundhouse, I think it was the first one. Back in 2009, I want to say, in Vancouver. She was in Edmonton before that. But so I kind of tried out a little bit of everything, except for I haven't tried farmers markets. That works really well for some people. For me, it was just not a direction that I went in. But I've tried the elementary school fundraiser type markets, the community markets. I've done like local little shows, and I just would try them as I found them, and I would stick with the ones that worked for me, and some just don't. And I'm not going to say I have not. I've definitely had a couple of zero market sales, or, you don't cover your booth and you just don't do that one again.
Right. How do you even find, I think it's probably a little easier now with social media to get a lead on where markets are, but when you started out, how did you even hear about markets that you might be a good fit for? Did you have, like, was it through friends or just?
It must have been, or, you do one market and you find out about it from another one. I mean, I started before online and social media was really that big. And I started on the Sunshine Coast. I was kind of living up there part-time. And I still do a couple of the shows that I started off doing there. And one of them is the Sunshine Coast Arts Council summer market that I actually just did in August. And I still do that one. So arts councils are another way of finding out, what they're. And then another one is just another little local show called the Gibson's Fall Fair. That's every Thanksgiving. And I'm still doing that one too. So smaller communities can also be a good way. Like if you're connected with a smaller community somehow, that can be a good way to get into as well. But like I was starting to make a list of the different shows that I've done. Some of them I've continued with and others I've not. And there's probably a list of like almost 20 different ones I've tried out. Yeah.
Yeah. Do people almost expect you at some of those shows now? Like, do they come looking for you because you've been doing them for 8 or 9 years?
Definitely. And or some are not specifically looking for me, but they recognize me,
right?
Or my brand or whatnot. Like Make It and Got Craft people look for me. I will say, because I've had to ebb and flow because of kids and life in general, I'm not kind of one of those career craft show people. Like I've got friends who have a very specific brand and they market themselves incredibly well, and they don't have kids, and this is what they do hardcore 24/7, and they've done amazing things with their businesses. And that there's quite a lot of those brands out there that started a little bit after I did, so they're slightly younger than I am, and I'm in awe of what they have created. And I'm not that brand. Like I haven't been able to get to that level because I've allowed life to be part of.
It's just different priorities, right?
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Yeah, so there's nothing wrong with that.
No, not at all. But like I'm definitely, so I'm not always sought after at markets specifically. In terms of like my brand is really, really recognizable. But I definitely have repeat customers and people who do recognize me. Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry. You've also done you do the Vancouver Etsy Collective market quite frequently as well too. And that's another, if you do sell on Etsy, there are often Etsy collective groups in different cities throughout North America, and I'm assuming probably in other countries as well, that you can join, and that I think gives you a little bit more of an opportunity to be asked to participate in those markets. So
So yeah, the one in Vancouver is called Vancouver Etsy Collective, and they just had an online
Yeah.
one. But normally it's called Etsy Made in Canada, and Etsy kind of helps collaborate with all these different groups, and then often a whole bunch of different places will run that show on the same day.
Yes.
Um, and But right now it's mostly online for obvious
Yeah,
reasons.
and I think Etsy has actually been quite, I mean, Etsy has its pros and cons for sure, but I think they've been quite responsive in helping a lot of their vendors do online, like helping to facilitate an online marketplace that during the pandemic. And I
Yeah,
don't mean online marketplace in the sense that Etsy is an online marketplace, but
right.
they've actually helped facilitate these specific weekend online markets
Yeah, it's
and
like
helped.
more locally focused,
Yeah.
driven type of markets. Yeah, and they have set up like there's always a lookbook that
Hmm.
all the artists are put into, and it's kind of it does all drive back to your store, but your Etsy store. But yeah, it's an interesting way to create an online different angle for marketing.
Yeah, definitely. Another place that I've seen a lot of people get leads on market is just if you've never done markets before, just start with your local community or your local neighborhood Facebook group. Every
Yes.
neighborhood has one. And that's often, I have seen a lot of the elementary schools who do, like you said, when you first started out, you did several of those.
Yeah.
A lot of them will put a call out for vendors, usually anywhere from 2 to 4 months in advance, kind of thing,
Yeah.
of when the market's going to be. And that's a great way to just dip your toes in the water. And they're not usually huge,
No.
but they are, the people who come are usually there to support the school, so they do come and they do buy. So it can be a good way to kind of dip your toes into the water
And I
there.
think it all depends on what your product is, what your price
Hmm.
point is, what your target market is. And I mean,
Absolutely.
I did one a couple of times, and I think my jewelry was just maybe a little bit too high priced for that
Mm,
particular market. So that's why I didn't continue with it. It wasn't necessarily specifically the right. But
right.
it was great to try it, and it's everything single time you'll learn more things, and you'll learn what works and what doesn't, and you'll tweak your display, and it's always a learning process.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great
Trial and error. Like,
it.
don't be put down
Yes.
if it doesn't work. Just move on to a different. Don't keep doing the same thing over and over again. You've got to tweak it and then move on to a different market, or
Yeah, those small markets are a great place to, like you said, test out your display or learn what works in this. If you've never done a display before, that can be very intimidating just to
yeah,
even think about like all the things you need. But it's a great place to test out your, what if you're using Square for like e-purchases. That's not the word I mean, but when people want to pay with their debit
when you
card or their
payment,
credit.
yeah. When you
Yes.
take payment, Square for me is the only way to go. Back in the day, I used to take an imprint of someone's credit card,
Yeah.
and they would sign those like old school slips of paper, and then I would take it home and I would dial it all into the phone and hope that the charge would go through. And you know what? Over the many, many, many years that I did that, I don't think I got a smart till about, oh gosh, don't want to quote it. Maybe it was 2013. That's what I did, was credit cards swipes on the old school paper, and I rarely had anybody. I had one or two that didn't go through.
Didn't default. Oh, that's pretty lucky. Yeah.
Yeah, it was definitely, you could trust people. It was really nice. I would take their phone numbers. Occasionally there'd be an expired call. You'd call them up and they'd say, "Oh, I'm so sorry," and give you a new expiry date or something.
Yeah.
But doing Square, first of all, they just had the sort of swipe that you stuck into the bottom of your phone, and now they have the tap. And certainly now, I'd say 2/3 or 3/4 of my sales are with Square.
Yeah, and if you've never used that before, if it's your first time using it,
Yeah,
what's better than trying it out at a really small market? You don't want
yeah,
to test that out at like a big market for the first time.
yeah. And I have two Square taps in case something goes wrong with one of them, which actually happened at my last show.
Oh, that's good thinking.
Yes.
Definitely. So, when people are applying to these markets, all markets I think work a little bit differently. Some some will take anybody from the community who applies, but others are more juried markets. And maybe you could just talk a little bit about what a juried market is so people understand what that actually means.
Right. So you would fill out their application form, and then usually it's between 3 and 5 photos of your work. And so you need to know, because a lot of the time they'll just look at the photos. They won't even look at your website to jury it. They'll just look at those photos you submit. And so you need to knock their socks off with those images and really represent what you make or what you want to sell. And then you wait to hear back from them. But one thing I did learn, and I actually learned this later on, especially I guess because social media has become more present, is make sure you follow the market on all their social media.
Yes.
Make sure you are commenting on their posts and interacting with them, because you then become a person to them.
Yes.
And that is what happened with Gotcraft. I applied to Gotcraft for years and didn't get in, or it doubled up with Make It, and I had already been doing Make It, and I got to know the organizers as people, and they got to know me as a person, and that was when I got in.
Yes, so important.
Because we're all people.
We are.
Media, right?
And people want people at their markets who support the market.
Yes.
That's really important, and I think sometimes we forget those types of things, but building those relationships is so important. And I think it's also important to understand that there's a good reason why a lot of markets are juried, and that is to help the sellers who are there. It would be really weird to go to a market and 90% of them are jewelry vendors.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be good for the jewelry vendors.
Yes.
And it would be weird for the people attending too. Like, oh, all they sell is jewelry here. I was looking for pottery. So that's one of the reasons why you'll see a market being juried, is that they have a certain number of jewelry vendors, a certain number of pottery vendors, a certain number of food vendors, etc., in order to make sure that they have good variety, and to make sure that, as you mentioned previously, one of the markets you did, you felt your price point might have been a bit too high for that particular audience. And most markets will know who their customer is. And so they'll be able to make a decision based on your price points and the type of work that you do, whether you will be a good fit for, because all markets, like they want people who are attending to buy. Like,
yes,
that's crucial to their success. So if people
they want you to come back
exactly,
years too.
They want you back next year.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. So that's the reason why markets are juried. And if you don't get in, and I'm sure you mentioned with Gotcraft, you got turned down many times.
Just keep applying. I mean, if they see you constantly, if they see your name constantly, you're going to get more attention from them. Or you could even write, like some markets, they're people. So if they're not accepting you, you could always write. And as long as you take it as constructive criticism, there may be a specific reason that they haven't chosen you. That could be a whole variety of different things. Like you said, it could be your price point is not what their target market is looking for. So you can always look for feedback from the market organizers as well.
Yeah, really good point.
But if they don't reply to that, don't take that personally either.
Yeah, sometimes they're just really busy, especially the bigger markets where there's 100+ vendors. It can be a lot. So you mentioned photography as one of the things that you can do to make your work stand out when you're applying. But are there any other things that people can do when they apply to really make themselves stand out? So as you mentioned photography, and you also mentioned interacting with them on social media so that they come to know who you are. But is there anything else you can think of that would be useful?
Make sure you have all the social media accounts that you need to have, and make sure you're active on all of those social media accounts, because also markets are looking for vendors who will also promote their markets, so that extends their reach. They don't want someone with a silent social media account. I mean, they may still accept you, but you're more likely to be appealing to them if you can also help them to further their reach on social media.
Yeah, if you can help them sell tickets, that's a bonus.
And you often are required in your contract when you're applying to that you will promote the show.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so I know nothing about this. I've only done one very small local market where
Right.
there was no contract. So
Yeah.
you are often asked to sign a contract. Is that really common?
Well, it's a tick on the application.
Okay,
I mean, a contract in that kind of a way,
right.
but it is part of your obligation in accepting to go to be part of the show. Is most of the time now they'll say you have to promote.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Good to know. You want to be involved. You want to make sure. And what you mentioned, social media platforms. Are there any in particular that they're really looking for that you really do need to be on? Or
I would say Instagram is
yeah,
probably the top one right now. I have a Facebook page, but it's just really mostly I post reshare events from their page onto my page.
right.
So that extends the reach as well. And I'm not on TikTok yet. I find I need to drive more and do more video. Like I'm trying to do more reels on
Yeah,
Instagram and all of that. But I do find it's not my go-to. I'm
yeah.
more of a still images kind of a person, but I am having to learn to adapt. So that is something that I'm working on. And maybe I'll eventually be on TikTok, but
I was just talking to another guest yesterday. Actually, I think we were recording and we were talking about TikTok. She does
yeah.
a lot of. She's actually a photographer and a videographer, so
Okay.
she's comfortable with video, but she is still struggling with TikTok. And I am on TikTok and I don't think I've posted anything yet. It was more just to grab my handle kind of
Oh,
thing.
right.
Yeah.
I should probably do that.
But really the only thing I seem to get shown on TikTok, I was telling her, is I seem to get a lot of canine accounts, as in police dogs for
Oh,
some
really?
reason, like yeah, canine, like K9.
Oh,
Yeah, so I get a lot of police officers with their canine companions, and
that's
some
so
of the videos are really interesting, but I don't know how I've got sandwiched
pegged
into
as the
this.
queen on the
I,
queen on the dog lady.
I don't know. They must know I'm a dog lady. I've never posted a video, so I don't know. I should take a look and see what my profile picture is. Maybe there's a picture of Sam in there. I can't remember. But yes, so I think you did make a point there where you said though that you are learning to adapt, and I think that's really important for all of us to remember, is that
So
things
important.
change and
Yeah.
we need to adapt. It doesn't mean you need to do everything, but you do need to be willing to learn new things. So
Yeah. I mean, Etsy from 2007 till now has been an evolution for
oh,
sure.
I can imagine. I can.
Even style of photography and what you post, how you post
Yeah,
it, and all of those things. And descriptions used to be extremely important, and now they're kind of hidden.
I
And
know.
there's tons of things that have changed in that time. It's and how the algorithm works. And but I will say the one thing I've never, sorry, going a little off topic, but
No, it's okay.
is I've never wavered on my prices. Like
Oh,
I haven't caved to, there's a lot of Etsy stuff that's really low priced.
yeah.
I refuse to do that, and I don't think it's good for your business. Certainly not good for your business long term.
No, we talk a lot about pricing on this show
Yeah,
and how most of us tend to really underprice and undervalue our own work.
yeah,
So that's really good to hear because, yes, Etsy, there are some days where Etsy really feels like it's a bit of a race to the bottom
yeah.
as far as pricing goes. And you're right,
Not
it has
for
evolved.
you long term.
No, it's not. It is not sustainable. If you are supporting yourself or helping to support your family,
Yeah,
if you're not making money, then really you just have a hobby.
yeah. And I look at a lot of the sellers because I'm part of lots of the Facebook groups for
Hmm.
Etsy, which are interesting places to be. Um, but I just don't understand how some of them are making any money at all.
Hmm.
I would think some of them were, and then they complain about Etsy fees and all of those things. And actually, I think Etsy is
Etsy's not
not.
bad as far as
No, I
fees.
don't think so at all. It never has been. It's as long as you're pricing your work accordingly.
Yeah, yeah, it's very interesting. I find that I make a lot of stickers and greeting cards, and that is just such a saturated
Yeah.
market. And sticker pricing, not so much greeting cards. I actually find most people tend to price their cards quite fairly, but stickers, my goodness, I look at what they're selling them for, and they're doing free shipping, and I'm like, there is no way you are making a dime on what you're making and selling. And which can be frustrating as a seller, but at the same time, if you do good work, people will find you. So
definitely with Etsy and pricing, you have to do you and not worry about everybody else. It's not a market that you look at what everybody else is selling for and fit yourself somewhere in there. You just do you and go forward with that.
Yeah, and I definitely made that mistake when I started. I really was like, oh my goodness, nobody's selling this for more than $2. There's no way I can charge $5 for it. And after my first year, I was like, oh, screw this.
Yeah. And also in the States, shipping is a whole lot less. So, I get this indicator on Etsy all the time. Oh, you're overcharging for shipping. I'm like, actually, I'm totally undercharging, but let's, so I just ignore that little pop-up that comes up.
Yes. But you're right about the photography and everything. It's like, as just somebody who's been a shopper on Etsy for almost since the beginning, the quality of the photography on there now is just amazing, really professional level. And
there's quite a range.
Yeah, well, there is, but not as much of a range as there used to.
No.
I mean, when it first started, everybody had these really, it was kind of like food blogging. When I first started, everybody had these orange photos of food, and now everybody's got these beautiful, gorgeous, professional quality photos. And I feel like Etsy's kind of gone the same way, which, part of that is our phones have much better capabilities and things like that now.
I had an SLR, or I always had a decent camera. Yeah. And so when I started, even in 2007, I was able to upload and somewhat edit decent photos. And I definitely, at the beginning, both at markets and online, had compliments about good photography.
Yeah, you've always had good photos. Yeah.
I kind of got left behind a little bit just because so many people accelerated their capabilities, but I'm doing my best to keep up with it. But again, that's adapting too.
Yeah, definitely. There's always something to learn. That's always an important thing to remember, is that you can't stand still.
No, definitely not.
So small markets or big markets or both? Right. Which, do you have a preference? Do you find that do you make more money at the big markets? You don't need to tell us how much you make or anything like that, but do you have a preference, or do you find that one performs better than the other? I think people have this assumption that if they get one of the big markets, they're set.
Right. Again, for me, it's definitely been trial and error. I have a fairly set schedule of what I do every year and ones that I won't do because it doesn't work for me. So, Make It and God Craft are great for me. And I do, like I said, 2 small ones on the Sunshine Coast and Etsy Made in Canada. And so those are kind of a mix of big and small, and they all perform differently. You have to, look at the comparison of, okay, how much do I sell and how much does the booth cost? I mean, the big ones, they cost a lot more. So, but with the small ones, I've had more hit and miss. So lots of trial and error.
I was actually going to ask you, where do booth fees tend to land? Because I think, or table fees, however they're referred to at the market you're at. Because I think also a lot of people, when they're first starting out, don't realize that there's a booth fee.
Right. Well, for the ones that I do, it ranges from $50 to almost $1,000. So, it's anywhere in between. It just depends. But also, how much they charge doesn't necessarily mean that you'll make more. Again, it's what you're selling, which ones work for you, which ones don't work for you.
And so when you're deciding if a market's been a success, what are you looking at? I'm assuming you're, first and foremost, you want to make sure you made your booth fees back, plus some extra, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so when you wrap everything up and you sort of are reviewing what happened at that particular market, what is it that makes you decide, this was a good one, I'd like to come back?
Definitely the booth fee plus. But sometimes there can be outside circumstances that the market itself can't change. Make It had a snowstorm one year. And there's just, again, go with the flow. There's certainly not anything that any of us could have done about that.
Right.
And there are other ones that just don't feel right. And the people weren't coming through the door. Even one that maybe I made okay sales, but I could feel like the next one, it just didn't feel like my fit. And yeah, like I said, just lots of trial and error. And I've done so many shows over the years.
Fair enough. And
sometimes you walk away and go, oh my goodness, that just felt awful. And other times you're super excited. And also, the other thing that can sometimes happen at markets, like I said, is sometimes they can be good for future marketing as well. Do you have a surge of social media uptick afterwards? Right. Did you get a wholesale or a consignment, like a store interested, that ends up being a great success? Markets aren't 100% about what you do in that moment. You might get more internet, like online sales afterwards. A lot of people do take a card, like definitely.
I do. I am totally a take a card shopper. I take a card and I like to go back after the market.
I don't understand that shopping mentality. I mean, it's right there in front of you.
I know. I just like to think, and I like to. A
lot of people do that. So again, having a good website is where they can purchase. Can be a great follow-up to your market as well.
And having a card. I know so many people who say, business cards are not, you don't need them anymore. But honestly, there are a lot of people out there who will take your card, stuff it in their pocket or their purse, and pull it out, a week later, a month later, sometimes even longer, and be like, I was going to check them out.
I had a woman come over to my booth at the show that I just did up at Sunshine Coast in August. And she said, my daughter gave me this card and I've been using it as a bookmark for, I don't know, however many years. And she's like, I recognize your brand and I still know your brand. And she looked at my stuff. I can't remember if she bought something or not, but sometimes, it's about the interaction rather than, so business cards in our line of work in a market craft show kind of way is definitely important.
Yeah, for sure.
Very important.
Yes, let's talk about that. So you've got a market. Woohoo! You're you're very excited. It's your first market. How do you prep? This is like the big question, and I'm helping out with my neighborhood's local market this year. It's the first year that our group has done one. I'm actually not participating, but I'm doing their branding and their graphics and stuff for them. This is one of the questions that gets asked is, how much inventory do I need? Like, how much should I bring? What should I bring?
I struggle with that even now.
Okay.
After so many years of doing that. But I always want to have way more than I think I need, because you'll always, unless you're have a perishable product, you need to have a full table still at the end of it.
Yes.
You can't have an empty table. It just, people want to see a full selection. And also, it helps to draw people in. Whereas if you have a very empty booth because you've sold a lot, I always have stuff to put out. I always have backstock. So I have a full table and I have backstock.
Do you take everything that you make, like your complete line, or do you really focus on making sure that you have a lot of stock of particular items when you go to a market?
I have a pretty good range of things. Yeah. I mean, obviously my best sellers, I'll try to have multiples of, and but again, that ranges depending on which market. It's very unpredictable.
And how far in advance do you start prepping? Because everything you make is handmade, and it's not, for me, I make greeting cards. I can print a greeting card off pretty quickly, but you're making jewelry, and that's very different.
I'm building my stock all year.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And then I'll have surges where, oh my gosh, I've got a market in 2-3 months, the bigger ones, definitely leading up to Christmas.
Right.
Where I'll accelerate what I'm making, but I definitely am making all year.
Okay, good to know. So there you have it.
Because I'm also filling stores and doing Etsy, so I need to be continuing to make new product and replenish old product and previous designs. So I have to keep making all the time.
And do you try to make sure that particularly for the markets that you do regularly, do you try to make sure that you have something new every time you do those markets that people haven't seen before, as well as your bestsellers?
When my babies were first born, I like I said before, I just tried to survive.
Yep.
And whereas now I do, especially again with social media, you need to have new product being shown all the time. And, you know, a lot of the like really career focused specific big sellers, they have collections that they let out, that they, you know, seasonal collections.
Right.
I've never found that really works for me. I don't creatively, I don't work like that. I just show my work as I make it.
Yes, but you are actually working on a collection right now. It's really cute. I love it.
Oh, the candy collection.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. And I'm trying to do, and I'll keep adding to that candy collection. Like it's literally a colorway that I will continue adding on to. And then I have this West Coast one that I did a couple of months ago, I started working on, and I'll keep adding to that one.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, traditionally fashion designers and accessory designers would have a collection and they'd release it all at one time.
Yeah.
I kind of, I let it out in little spurts.
But that's also actually really helpful on social media. It's nice to kind of have something that you can introduce every couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, to keep things fresh. So
but
other
also
big
with social media, you can go back and reuse older
sure.
photos because sometimes maybe someone didn't catch that one, or like I made more of a specific necklace for that last market that I had been making for years, but I reposted the photo and it got attention from that way because I hadn't posted it for a couple of years, I think. So
yeah, for sure. Let's talk about displaying your work, because that's another big question new people have. A lot of people they're not sure what's going to be there when they get to the market. Right. Are they going to have a table? Are they going to have a chair? Right. Which is probably all you're going to have, a table and a chair.
The organizers should always outline that in an application. Or you can option to have the chair or not have the chair, have the table, not have the table. And I have like a 6-foot table, I have an 8-foot table, I have my own tent, I have my own chair. So I can now
fill in the gaps.
Whatever needs to be done, I can bring a table or not, whatnot. I always bring my own chair.
Oh,
this is a good, my tip is, if you're continually getting up from like a regular height chair, people don't like it. Especially if your table display is quite high, because they think that they're inconveniencing you when you get up, and they tend to walk away.
Oh, that's so interesting. Okay.
Whereas I have like a bar stool from IKEA that folds flat, and then it just looks like I just sort of slip off the chair, so my height doesn't actually change. I don't actually sit a lot at shows either, but I mean I do have that chair if it's been a long show. Yeah. But yeah, that for sure, because I'm not inconveniencing. They're not inconveniencing anybody. They're not interrupting you. They're not, because people don't like that.
Yes, let's talk about that a little bit, because in my corporate life, we did a lot of trade shows, and I was involved both as somebody attending the trade show, and there was a buying show component of that, and I was also on the other side of setting up and helping the vendors set up and stuff. And I always found this so fascinating. I know when I'm a customer coming through, if the vendors are chatting with somebody in the booth next to them or something, I always feel like I'm interrupting. So I tend to just walk on by.
Yeah. Which is why I actually don't like having help with me. Whenever I have anybody behind my booth that either comes to visit me or just comes for whatever, my sales always dip during that time. And I either accept that because it's like a friend that I want to have a quick chat with, or my mom has brought me lunch or something like that. But in general, it's way better to be focused on your table, but not overwhelmingly so as well. I'm not a seller who can be in people's faces. I know it works for some people, but not me.
Yeah.
So yeah, I work on my own. I very, very, very rarely have help. I find that other people can't sell my work the same way that I can, even if they're a really good seller. Like I had a friend fill in, and she's a great seller, but it's so different buying it directly from the artist.
It is. One thing that always does draw me in is when I see people actually working in their booth on something.
I do that too.
Yeah, I find that so interesting. And it's like, even if I'm not necessarily going to talk to them or something, I'm like kind of drawn, because I want to get closer and see what it is they're doing, as long as they're facing me. If they have if they're facing the back of their booth, so I see their back, not so much.
Yeah, no, that's a killer. Yeah, it's terrible. You can never do that. Even when I'm eating, I'm like, oh, where do I eat?
Yes. And we'll get to that in a moment, because I know that things like bathroom breaks and
Yeah.
having a coffee or getting a bite to eat, you don't have a lot of opportunity to do that. But if we could just talk a little bit more about booth setup and display,
Sure.
like, so you're a jewelry seller, you make jewelry, you sell jewelry, so you have your booth display is obviously going to reflect the fact that you are selling things that people want to get up close and have a good look at, especially because a lot of your work is very delicate. So it's not necessarily something that people can see from a distance.
Yeah. So I have my whole table, even if it's a table that they're providing, I have plumbing tubes that I put on the legs to pop up the table.
Oh.
And that's, again, two reasons for that. One is that it makes it higher up to people's faces. And two, though I love children and I have my own, I found when my table was low, there was more chances of small hands touching in a way that I didn't want them touching my jewelry. Not that I don't want them to touch it at all, but kind of more destructive. Whereas it just takes away that a little bit.
That's interesting too, because I've been to shows where you have been selling, and I have never consciously noticed that your table is higher than everyone's, but the moment you said that, I'm like, oh my gosh, it is. Like, it's almost at like chest level for me.
It's quite high.
Yeah, and it allows me to really focus in particularly on things like your necklaces, which tend to be hanging on a displayer. So yeah, a lot of people, when they first start out, they have no idea how to set up their booth display. And, regardless of what you're selling, do you have any tips on things to draw people in or to help them display, and how to show their pricing? Do you show your pricing? Or
I do. Yeah, I have tags and prices on the fronts of everything. I know some jewelry designers put them behind, but on necklaces, I'll have a tag with the price on it. On the earrings, I'll have the price on the front of the card, because I dislike not being able to see a price when I come to a booth, and it will either make me have to ask, which I'm not always comfortable with because I'm not a super outgoing person, or I will walk away.
Yes, I'm the same. I'm exactly the same.
People want to see right away, is this a booth that I should be looking at, that I can afford, that, those kinds of things. And I want the price to be there. I want it to be open.
And where do you find things like fixtures to help you display what you're selling? I know you can get really creative at times with what you use.
I've had so many different displays over the years. It kind of is an ever evolving process. Like in the last few years, I've lightened up my display a lot. It's gone much more white. And though it's harder to keep clean, I do think it's the right direction for me to have gone. I used to do a lot more greens and browns and blacks. Like my jewelry display pieces were black, and I've switched them all to white now. Really good lighting, super, super important. And I still completely struggle with that.
How do you do lighting? I've never noticed lights in your booth. Like
there are those kind of goosenecked ones from IKEA that just have a little head on them. Now that's what I use. So those are pretty good. And then at Make It, I usually have a pipe at the top front of my booth that I pay for an extra pipe, and I put lights there, and I have 2 spots that come down. But I've never 100% been happy with my lighting. There's other people who do it better, but I think it's in a fairly good spot. But when I just have a table, I have maybe 4 or 5 of those little goosenecked lights from IKEA.
I'm just looking at the picture you sent of your table, and I can see them now. And I'll post this in the show notes for the episode. Everybody, Louisa sent me a really great photo of her table display and what she has.
That's an older one even too.
So
that's a few years old. It's changed again.
Has it? I haven't seen you in a while, so it's
I can send you another picture too.
Yeah, we'll post that just to give you some ideas. It's specific to jewelry, but even just looking at it, I can see things that you could use here if you were selling, knitted goods. I can see things here that you could use if you were selling greeting cards or prints. There's lots of different things here that could give you some ideas. So that is great. Thank you for sending that.
IKEA is great for creatively thinking outside of the box for display items. Like in that particular photo, you're looking at the boxes and the lights, and also I had picture frames laying on the table that I took out all the insides, and I just used the frame, and I covered a piece of foam core, I think it was, or cardboard with fabric, and like used stuffing as well. And so it kind of made like a pillow inside a photo frame, and those were all from IKEA.
Perfect. Yeah, lots of really good ideas here. And you also have a mirror, which I would think would be very important for somebody who is selling jewelry or even clothing or things like that. People want to see what it looks like.
Definitely. And I've had other booth vendors come over and use my mirror because they've forgotten it or they don't have one, or, you know, a lot of the time it's like viewers, vendors who don't have one. And I'm like, yeah, sure, go ahead. And I always have a hand mirror in the back in case there's more than one person wanting to look at the time, but I don't want to take up too much of my real estate of my table with two mirrors. So I have one hand mirror in the back that I can hand to someone if they want to be looking at the same time.
That's a great idea. Yeah. So think about the things people are going to, depending on what you sell, it's going to be different for everybody, but think about how a potential customer is going to want to, most people want to imagine how they're going to use what they're buying from you, whether it's clothing, jewelry, pillows, you know.
Or like anything that's on the body, you need a mirror for sure.
So that's always good. And if you sell things that have like candles, make sure that there's a way for them to smell what the candle smells like. Those kinds of things. People are going to want to know all of that type of stuff. Let's talk about market survival kits.
Okay.
Because I always had one of these.
One last thing with display though, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
With display is having different levels. Always really important. Don't have it all, just don't have it flat lay. Don't just lie your product down. Have a basket that you've got your scarves in or whatever. Have different levels of height. Super, super important. Or because from far away, if you think about everything flat lay, it's going to look like a really boring display.
Yeah, and just imagine that there's crowds too. So some people are short, some people are tall, and if you've got things at different levels, even if there's people in front of your booth, people will still be able to see some of the taller things that pop out. And you use like some crates in your display to give extra height, and I've seen people use things like milk crates and things like that to give just that little extra bit of height. I've seen a lot of artists who also use like almost like a folding door room divider panel to hang their prints on, so that they can have people can see it from different angles, and there's some height in there. So
that you can still put that on tabletop, which, you know, and then a banner of some kind, kind of display like that. Sometimes with the smaller shows, I have like a tall clip with a printout of my logo on it. And
then do you have like a pop-up, like a pop-up banner that's a little taller that can go next to your booth or something?
No, I have one that I clip to the front of my tablecloth.
That's another thing you have to be a little bit careful with. I know for bigger trade shows, they can often have very specific rules around what kind of signage you can have. So that's always a good thing to just check, and it'll usually be in whatever the market puts out. Like if some places can be really picky and you're not allowed to have anything that is behind you or that's too tall, or so.
That would always be outlined in the application. It often, majority of the time, they don't want you to be outside of your table. And so like nothing, no display in the front, that kind of thing. And to be honest, as a shopper and as a fellow artist, I don't want people to have stuff out in the aisles either.
It makes it really difficult for you have to think a lot of markets have a lot of parents with strollers.
But also it can block the booth next to you in terms of the flow, because people have to come out to go around to your thing that's out, and then the person will end up skipping part of the next person's booth to come back around. And so being a good neighbor, that is a good way. You don't want that.
No, you have to sort of, it's a lot of things to think about when you're first starting out, and some of it is just stuff you learn as you go along, but the more you can think through all of these different things before your first market, the better.
It's always good to be a good neighbor. That's another thing, and get to know the people next to you. I mean, not necessarily like a full conversation, but definitely like introducing yourself. And
I mean, you never know what might come out of.
I've met so many people from doing that.
Exactly. Plus, I would imagine if you need to run to the bathroom, it's always nice if you know the person next to you.
And just saying, I'll pop right back. And really, honestly, generally, people are very honest at the craft show. I don't think I've ever had anything swiped. So, and I just go to the bathroom if I need to. I always wait until there's a lull in traffic or whatnot. But I mean, if you do have someone who can come cover you, that's great. Often I'll have a friend or someone I know that comes to the booth and is like, do you need to go to the bathroom? And they're a shopper and they happen to come by, and I'll be like, hey, do you mind just staying here for just a minute?
Yeah, because you don't really get, they don't have like market breaks where they close things down for 5 minutes. Okay, everybody.
Yeah, exactly. Occasionally a market will have a float, like a volunteer person coming around who will give you breaks occasionally.
That's nice.
But I never rely on that because you don't know when they're coming. And
oh, that's nice. I didn't know that some markets did that, so that's actually quite cool.
Yeah, occasionally. It's not the norm, but it does happen.
So things happen when you're at markets, as I'm sure. And I know when I did a lot of trade shows, I always had my emergency kit that sat. Right. So what do you have in like your market survival kit?
Tylenol, for sure.
You're probably not allowed to have a wine bottle.
No. But I sometimes get like pressure headaches or things like that. Like you don't stop. You just have to keep going. If you're at your booth, there's no sick days or, sick leave or anything like that. So if you got a headache, you power on. What else do I have? I have this, like, again, for headaches, is this like sage peppermint roller thing. I have that. Band-Aids are always good to have because you never know. The one thing I always forget that I know that I need to have is paper towel or some kind of thing, because if you spill your drink, which has happened, or you get some sauce on your hand from whatever you're eating or whatnot, it's paper towel is just super handy. Same thing with duct tape, and string, just because you never know, and some safety pins.
Yeah, I would imagine like a little pair of scissors and
yes, always scissors. Yeah, extra pens always, because what if your pen runs out? You always have backups of that.
Yeah, I always found a stapler really handy. It's always amazing to me. I never use a stapler in real life. Like but
you at shows.
But at a show, it's always amazing what a stapler can fix.
I always have a receipt book as well, and this is again maybe back from like years ago, but on occasion people want, not so much now with Square, but sometimes people will want a paper receipt.
Oh, interesting.
And I don't have a Square. Again, it's like once in a blue moon that someone asks for a receipt. You have to have something to be able to give them. So I've had the same receipt book for probably 10 years or something. But occasionally someone will ask for that.
Good to know. Yeah.
I've never figured out why people ask
for
it. But, and again, like I said, it's like once in a blue moon, but I do have that in there.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay, one of my questions was also going to be, should you bring a helper? And you just mentioned that you don't actually love having somebody in your booth with you.
I don't think
Yeah. How do you manage things like food? Do you bring yourself a lunch, or does somebody, I know your husband occasionally will pop by, and your mom?
I have a lovely husband who makes my food for me every time I have a market. And I have tips for that too. I don't like to handle my food when I'm at a market, and certainly now, definitely, I don't want to be touching it, even if I disinfect my hands. But I'm not able to go to the bathroom and wash my hands between every single bite. So I usually things that I can eat with a fork.
Yeah. No, you don't want to smear ketchup or teriyaki sauce on your display, or especially with a white display.
I have soy sauce on my display from when I tried to do sushi one time.
Exactly. So,
and also things that you can eat in one small bite. Because if you don't have any help and you're trying to eat your food while there are people there, if you have this big, huge thing in your hands and you're taking these big, giant bites, it doesn't look so good. People are really understanding. You're often, put your hand to your mouth and sorry. Bite-sized food that's already like a sandwich. If you're having a sandwich, have it cut up like you would if you were a kid.
Yeah, maybe no burgers, no pizza.
And occasionally my mom will bring me food and we'll eat together. But like I said, that usually means a dip in my transactions.
Do you think your daughters might want to help out at some point?
So my older daughter has wanted to help out for years.
Oh, really?
And yeah, oh, she's desperate too. And really, when she was 6 and under, it, or even 7 and under, it really is a bit of a disaster, even when she's helping with setup and tear down. She's quite helpful with tear down now, putting all the jewelry back in its little baggies.
Right.
But she helped me at one of the make-its right before the pandemic. So that was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, she must have been 7. And yeah, she was fine. She didn't interrupt me or anything, but she certainly was not any help at the booth. And my youngest, forget it. No, I don't want her. She's so disruptive.
That'll be interesting to see how they develop in that sense as they get older.
But I think, yeah, they're just still not there yet. Yeah. And they're long days often, especially the big shows. Make It is a long, long day. It's 11 till 9.
And it goes on. It's not a one-day show. It's
5 days.
Yeah, that's a long one. So speaking of pandemics, of course, we're still in the middle of one. And so a lot of markets have shifted to online. And I think this year seems to be a bit of a hybrid. I definitely know some in-person markets that are happening, but I know some that are still holding off and doing an online, or are in a situation where they are tentatively planning to be in person, but know that they may have to pivot at the last minute because things just aren't very predictable right now. So you did a lot of online markets last year. How do you have any recommendations for participating in those?
They're just not the same as in person.
No,
they never are. They're not going to be. It's just a completely different experience. Like the add-on purchases that you might have in person, like I sell hair ties as well. Like those are a quick, easy add-on, but unless they're looking for it for an online market, they're not necessarily, it's not in their face as much as it would be as an in-person market. So definitely like the value per transaction is lower with an online market. So I foresee it as it keeps me in the game. It keeps me going, it keeps me producing, and it keeps your name out there. And I think that I've always thought that was super important. Even when I had little babies and stuff, I wanted to just continue to keep my name out there so I wasn't forgotten. And it's marketing. You get marketed on their web, on their Instagram, you market them, so you're shown as being still active, but the sales are not the same.
No, it's just a little harder. There's not the same sense of urgency because it's online. They know they can come back in a week and it'll they can still buy from you online. Might not be through the market portal or whatever, but they still know that they can find you. So it's not quite the same, but like you said, it's a really great way to just keep your name and your brand in front of people. And I mean, if it's a market that you maybe haven't done in person before, because I mean the pandemic's been going on long enough that they maybe you've started your business or you've wanted to start doing markets, it's also a way for you to get to be known by the market organizer. Yes, and that's the first market I did earlier this year was an online market, but it got my name on the list for when they are ready to go back to in-person markets. And I probably wouldn't have had that opportunity if I hadn't participated in the earlier one. So, and it was a really great way for me to just dip my toes in and get comfortable with how organizers talk to people and communicate and the expectations and things like that, and get used to the idea of how to promote and all of that. So it was actually a really nice stepping stone for me. I appreciated it.
And the cost is usually going to be a lot.
There was
less.
No cost for that one, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, okay. It was really nice. So I think they kind of realized that we had to donate an item for draw. It was a local elementary school one, so they were doing some silent auction things and some gift baskets and stuff. So we had to donate as part of our entry fee, which was fine. That was but I think a lot of them realize that they can't guarantee the same return on sales, so it's harder to charge what you would for an in-person market. Yeah,
like Make It has canceled.
Oh, have they?
Happening this year,
Oh, I thought they were going ahead. That's too
they
bad.
were, and applications were out, and like payments were out, and that's all been. I think it was beginning of September, end of August, when the numbers were starting to get bad again. That was when she was starting to think about it, but it's only in the last couple of weeks that she went ahead and canceled it. Now, Gotcraft has, since they've sent out applications originally, I'm booked for both their online market and their in-person market around Christmas. So
okay, fingers crossed.
So they've decided to do both.
Yeah. Okay. Fingers crossed. Yeah. Hopefully next year.
But I've got into a few more stores during the pandemic because that's a way of filtering my stock to still be seen by people. Because, for example, Bird on a Wire, when things were really shut down, Bird on a Wire is a store that has my work. They put everything online. Same thing with Giving Gifts. She put it online. So they were selling through their online platforms as well as me selling on mine, which got to a broader audience.
Yeah, I know you kind of doubled back down on Etsy as well during the pandemic.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, I had already been trying to build up to that because both my girls were in full-time school for the first time ever last year.
Yeah.
So yeah, I knew that I wanted to kind of up Etsy, start working on Etsy more once they were both in school.
Yeah, so that was good that you were able to do that. And it was here in BC, kids stayed in school for the most part, I think, which was not the case for other parts of the country. So
we pulled ours a couple of times, but overall they were there.
Yeah, so that's good that you were able to have that extra time, and it's good that they were able to go to school and be with their friends. Frankly,
so very important for everybody.
Yes.
But then we got the puppy, and now I have him all day.
You have another kid. You have a new baby.
Yeah, totally a new baby. Just as much time demand as the kids were. And
if you follow Louisa on social media, you will see pictures of puppy Archie. He's a very cute chocolate lab puppy.
I'm thinking of doing a poll on my stories asking if people are there for the puppy or the jewelry.
I'm there for both. I mean, I will never walk away from somebody who's showing pictures of their dog. So
exactly. I know I got a few more followers when he was a baby.
It's funny because the audience knows I have a dog, but I actually have a lab. He's a lab as well. So he used to pop up quite frequently on my social media. He's not on there anywhere near as much now that I've really focused in on my artwork, but that's who I'm known for. That's what I'm known for. Yeah. I'm still known for Sam, and I still get questions about him. And whenever he makes an appearance, usually in my stories, I get so much interaction. Everybody just loves to see him. So,
And it makes you a person.
It does. It makes you a person.
You're not just a product. You're a person.
For sure.
That's the thing about social media is that they want to know who the person is.
That's right. And Sam's a person too.
And he's so cute.
He's a sweet pea. He really is.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you so much for all your time and your knowledge. This is fantastic. We learned so much today.
Good.
Can you maybe can you tell us what's next for you? Do you have any plans in terms of your business going?
Again, still trying to build Etsy back up. No, it'll never, not to what it used to be, but what it can be in the current environment. Right. Continuing to up my photography game again. Working on video presence on social media. That's a huge one for me right now. And building my presence on Instagram. I'm always continuing to want to do that, but working on reels and all of that. Video presence is really my main focus right now, and continuing to build my skills with my beadwork as well, because I haven't always done beadwork. No, I used to mostly do wire wrapping and like beading from that kind of angle, and I've also done macrame, and I've also done leather work with like woven leather work. But beadwork is kind of taken over for now, so I'd like to continue increasing my skills and in that department.
It's and if people want to see your work, where can they find you online?
You can find me on my Etsy shop, which is Luli Designs, or you can find me on Instagram as well, Luli Designs Jewellery. Oh, and that's the other thing I'm working on is I'd like to open my own website, probably a Shopify, just to diversify my online presence to not always just be Etsy.
Yeah.
Because lots of repeat customers would probably rather buy from my own website. So that's definitely something I need to build up as well.
That's what I'm working on right now. It's about, I would say, 2/3 done.
Okay.
It's taken me all year. It's sort of like a in the background project, but yeah.
I have opened Shopify on my web browser, and that is all I've done.
Yeah. I'm trying to make Shopify work with WordPress, and I just don't know if that's going to happen, maybe. Okay. So we'll see.
Yeah. And I'd like to make my Instagram shoppable too, and I'm not sure how to do that. So that's the other thing.
Yes, that's actually a really good point, because I figured out how to make Facebook shoppable with Etsy, but
you have.
I have, and it's not super easy. It's just it's awkward. It's not hard, but it's awkward. But I cannot make it work with Instagram, and it seems to be because it's not my domain. Right. So I think if you're able to make it your domain, having your own website, it is much more shoppable.
You have 10,000 followers, you can do links, so then you could link to your Etsy, but I don't have 10,000 followers, so that's not something I can do yet.
Although I have heard that, because they're getting rid of the swipe up feature on
and Instagram, it's being switched to the links.
These link stickers. Yeah. I have heard that those link stickers are being rolled out to accounts with less than 10,000 followers.
I'm so hoping, because that would be an easy workaround for making my product shoppable. Yeah.
And they have publicly stated that they are trying to make Instagram a more shoppable platform. So I'm really hoping that they're going to roll out to these smaller accounts in order to make that happen.
Too, because I don't want to have to do inventory control for multiple different platforms.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Because I may only have one of something. I don't want to have it separate inventory from Etsy, from Shopify and Instagram and Facebook. Like, if it sells and it sells in two places, like, what do you do then?
Yeah, I mean, well, that's the thing with making my Facebook page shoppable, is it is directly tied to Etsy. So they're actually purchasing through Etsy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I don't have to worry about inventory there yet. But yes, if you were to bring in a Shopify store and an Etsy store and wherever else you sell, then it becomes an inventory management thing.
And at one point I thought you could do Shopify and Instagram together.
I think
it was all. Can you still? Yeah.
I think you can. Yeah. I mean, if the Shopify, because if you had lulidesigns.com, sorry, everybody, we're just going off on a tangent. But this may be helpful to people. So.
Very helpful. Yeah.
If you had lulidesigns.com, and that's where your Shopify is, what is attached. That domain is attached to your Shopify shop. Then in theory, from what I understand, you should be able to make Instagram shoppable. And it would be through your Shopify shop. You wouldn't have to have separate inventory for Instagram, but you would still need to manage the inventory for your Shopify shop and your Etsy shop at the same time.
And Square and Etsy are partnered, and you can add your Square to your Etsy, so that. But there's the reason I haven't done it yet, which I'll explain. Is that you can then, if you sell something at a market, it'll take it out of your Etsy.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah.
But they also take the Etsy fee.
Oh, well, there's that. Okay.
Which I think is a bit cheeky. So I haven't connected those two. However, from an inventory management standpoint, it would be extremely useful.
I do know from another group I'm in, from a program that I'm taking that is for product sellers, that there are apps out there, Shopify apps and other software programs that will let you sync your inventory between Etsy and Shopify and a few other things. I have not investigated them, and I could not for the life of me give you names of them right now. Okay. But I do see them talked about. So there is, in theory, some tools out there that could help you with that, but
because I usually rush into my Etsy and take things down in the middle of a market. Oh no, it's sold!
So that's another thing you need at your booth. You need access to the internet.
Yes. Oh yeah, for sure.
You need something that will let you get into your Etsy shop.
Exactly.
Oh, great. Well, again, Louisa, thank you so much. This has been really great, and I think it's going to be a super helpful episode. And so for everybody listening, I will put links to where you can find Louisa on the show notes, and I will also link to her photos of her booth displays so that you can have a look at that and maybe get some ideas. And yeah, I think that is it for this week. Thank you again. It was really great to chat and have a catch up.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's been really fun. So thank you everybody for listening. And that's it for this week. And I will be back next week with another new episode. We'll talk to you all then. Thank you so much for joining us for the And She Looked Up Creative Hour. If you're looking for links or resources mentioned in this episode, you can find detailed show notes on our website at andshелookedup.com. While you're there, be sure to sign up for our newsletter for more business tips, profiles of inspiring Canadian creative women, and so much more. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe to the show via your podcast app of choice so you never miss an episode. We always love to hear from you, so we'd love it if you'd leave us a review through iTunes or Apple Podcasts. Drop us a note via our website at andshелookedup.com or come say hi on Instagram at andshелookedup. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.